Hi, Maud. This is Ray Bone, your lobbyist, with another legislative update. This is Friday, February 5th, and we have had some activity here at the Capitol. But what I'd like to do first is go over how I think everything is going generally. Um, to begin with, it's very difficult to get bills introduced, I think, much less heard. Um, I was told at one point by the revisor's office that there were over 1,600 bills in the queue, and that was a month and a half ago, or yeah, I guess it was the beginning of the third week of session. And frankly, they had 1,600 bills waiting in the queue, and they must have about 2,000 at this point because if you look at the number of bills that have been introduced, which is only about 600, you can be sure there's a lot of them waiting to be introduced. So anyway, that's kind of the tempo that we're seeing, and we're also hearing that uh, because of the difficulty of getting all these bills heard, that the leadership is basically telling chairs that they better focus on those bills that they really need. Um, you say they have hour and a half sessions, hearings, have one or two. Some have lucky enough to have three, but even with that, that's not a lot of time because one bill can take up your whole hearing period. And so they have to be I guess what I'm saying is the chairs have to be very judicious of what bills are going to put on the agenda. Uh, and they're even doing that now. I think once you get within 2 weeks of the deadlines, it's going to be even more problematic. Many of the chairs used to put on 20, 30 bills the deadline week to get them all heard. They're not going to have that luxury at all. If they can hear uh, maybe 8 or 10 of those, they're going to be probably pretty lucky. So, with that being said, that gives you some idea of what's going on here. Um, it, I have to say though, it's been very good working with legislators and working with staff. They've been very prompt about getting back to us for meetings and any questions or issues that we may want to bring up with them. So from that aspect, the communications aspect is not too bad, um, but the paperwork aspect is much more difficult. Uh, I mentioned deadlines. Let me just say that the deadlines have come out. And of course, the purpose of the committee deadlines is to kind of bring some finality to all the bills that are out there. So the first committee deadline, and these are deadlines, by the way, agreed to by both bodies. The first committee deadline is March 12th, and what that means is that all the policy bills have to be through all the policy committees in one body or another. And then the second one is March 19th. And what that means is basically all the policy bills have to be out of policy committee. They either need to be in finance committee, taxes, or someplace, one of the larger committees that really don't have deadlines, or be on the floor of the houses. So anyway, April 9th is the final finance deadline. And what that simply means is you have to um, have your omnibus bills. The chair has to have any omnibus or singular bills that deal in finance to the Ways and Means Committee and the Finance Committee. Otherwise, they're dead. Um, so that's a fairly early deadline uh, because typically the first deadline is not till the 20th, maybe the 25th, usually the end of March. So I would say it's a couple weeks earlier than normal. So anyway, so that's what we're up against here. One of the things, the committees that really have no deadline are the full finance committee and the taxes committee and ways and means, capital investment, and the rules committees. So once you get bills in there, you're pretty much set. Now, whether or not anything's going to happen with them, that's up to the chair. But that's the reality. Also mention the Easter break is March 27th through April 5th, and what that means is that basically they close down for a week or so there, and I don't know if you call it we get a reprieve, but we certainly get a little spell where we can take a breather. Unfortunately, during this time, there are usually many trips planned to get away from it all, so to speak. But I don't think that's going to happen this year, unless, of course, people get vaccinated, and that comes far and few between at this point. The other an update on MAUD's priorities. The Clean Water Fund, we have an additional 28 million. I think, yeah, it's 28 million that's sitting there that hasn't been nothing's been recommended by the Clean Water Council. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen with that money. After the February forecast, which will come out late in the month, the governor will probably be hopefully making recommendations on how to spend that additional money. And one of the big issues on this legislation always is the 22 million that's been traditionally allocated towards the SWCDs for capacity purposes, because the legislature can't come to an agreement on how to fund them more properly through the general fund. But anyway, so that's we're waiting on that money. I see the committees are going to start hearing some of the sections of the clean water funding. So that's going to start next week. I saw that the agriculture committee has a hearing, so it looks like that's beginning to get out. Our tax levy issue, we are trying to schedule meetings with the property tax subcommittee chairs in both the Senate and the House, hoping that we can get some time with them to talk about our general fund issues and appeal to them to work with us on that. So stay tuned on that. We'll keep you appraised. Hopefully we can get something next week where we can sit down and actually, when I say sit down, have a Zoom meeting with them, which, by the way, actually works pretty well. So the other issue is our bonding efforts. We have been working with the Red Board lobbyist on the flood hazard mitigation programs, and we've already met with the two chairs of the bonding committees, both in the House and the Senate, and talked to them about that program and why it's necessary to keep the funding moving on that. And I thought we had two pretty good meetings. I don't anticipate this year that there will be anything coming out of the legislature on much of anything coming out of the legislature on bonding. I believe in the Senate side, they're looking at doing around a $240 million bill that would help with repairing and updating and maintaining present infrastructure. And the House really hasn't signaled what they're looking at. I think the legislature, if we could get the 240 for that, will probably be fortunate. The governor, they've indicated the governor is going to come out with over $1 billion bonding bill. We'll see what happens, but that's going to be a big push for him on that. I'm not saying he can't get it done because he's the governor, but anyway, I think he's going to be pushing pretty hard on that to keep, especially in this time where we need to keep people working once we can get our workforce back out and moving. Some of our other priority kind of administrative efforts, the appealing of public waters. right now, DNR has the authority to kind of unilaterally um, pick what waterway or lake or whatever is a public waters. Uh, there is a court case right now in Renville County, and I think that's going to get in the way of any potential legislation because legislators typically don't like to get involved in issues where there are court proceedings pending. That's been my that's traditionally what the legislature does, and that's been my observation over the years that that they try to stay out of those issues and let the legislature lets the court decide what it wants. If they don't like what the court says, then they come back and make that final change or decision or whatever they want to do. So I don't know if we're going to see any legislation. I was told earlier on that we would see some legislation on this issue, um, but I haven't seen anything to date. So we'll have to wait and see. And in talking with DNR, they have no intention of introducing anything at this point, and they just basically said we're dealing with the court case. Wake boats. There has been nothing that I've seen dealing with wake boats. I think because of the controversial nature of that, um, I would say it's doubtful we'll see much on that at all. Um, there's been a lot of discussion about maybe the right approach would be just to have a lot more educational efforts on them, and let the potential owners of those know that they are somewhat problematic. So that's something we may, if the DNR decides to take that approach, that's something we may want to piggyback with them on um, for our lakes and waterways. The other storage in the Minnesota River Basin, there is legislation out there. It's um, Senate File 81, and then also we have House. We have. Sorry, I got interrupted by a phone caller. We have House File by Representative Lippert, and that's House File 518. I don't know if I mentioned Weber's is House File 81 or Senate File 81. Anyway, those are identical bills, and I looked at them, and I mean, they're creating a commission for the Minnesota River, and uh, they don't really seem to have much teeth to them. Um, I appreciate any feedback on those that you want to give me or give Emily and myself, but there's not the way I would do it. There's no water management districts or anything like that. So, but anyway, we're just kind of watching that right now and seeing if anything really develops from that. And they also say that it's under Bowser's purview, and Bowser's going to give them all this money, the local government there. Only it doesn't specify the amount of money, nor does it specify where they're going to get that money. So again, another one of those. So what I'd like to do to the commercial salt is as far as I know, it hasn't even been introduced yet. So I don't know what the approach is going to be on that. Um, Hopefully, I'll be snooping around the next week or two to see if I can find out what's on the agenda for that. Um, I know people were kind of getting tired of talking about it at the end of last session. So, but I will have to do some snooping around on that. In terms of any defensive actions we have to take, I haven't seen any bills that particularly are geared towards watershed district. There was a discussion in House taxes the other day, property taxes on. I think the SWCDs were talking about doing a pilot program for tax levy. In that discussion, several of the refs, their representatives referenced um, some of the levy issues with watershed districts, and just as a reference. So that's still on their minds, just and that's in Greater Minnesota. So just to let you know. But other than that, I haven't seen the other issues we've dealt with in the past. So with that, I think that's everything I have for today. I'd like to conclude, and what I'd like to say is that we are planning some kind of virtual session for our legislative briefing on the afternoon of March 17th. So we hope you keep your calendar open for that. I'm sure you'll be getting more information from Emily fairly soon. So with that, I want to conclude and say have a happy weekend, and stay warm this weekend. It's supposed to be cold.